I will take a roll. Alderman Hunter.
Present.
Alderman Dearson.
Here.
Alderman Schwade.
Present.
Alderman, okay, and I'm here. We have a quorum. First item on the agenda is School District 111 request for money allocation from TIF pursuant to our intergovernmental agreement.
I think, were you going to change the order of the agenda?
No, we can, as long as he called that, let's just do that, and then we'll go to the bonding issue. We received a request from District 111, and I think Jim is passing it out there. In the past, we have helped them with projects that involve the TIF district they're located in, which is what I call the Washington Avenue TIF that goes down to the high school on Jeffrey Street. They've got several projects. They've sent a letter to us outlining those projects. We didn't give them any funds last year. The last time we allocated some funds out of that TIF district to 111, I think we gave them, I believe, and I didn't look up historically to see what it was, I think $220,000. We're recommending that we allocate out of that TIF towards the projects that they've listed in this letter, $250,000, $250,000. There are adequate funds in there. All bond payments have been made, so there's the money is there to sufficiently do that. And what we would do is move a motion to do that, set those funds aside, waiting the expenditure from the school district, and then we would reimburse them in total. And so it's the administration's recommendation that we allocate $250,000 out of the Washington Avenue TIF to District 111.
I so move.
Seconded.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. The motion will go on to the City Council next meeting. Now, let's skip to the third item on the agenda. Okay, review of bond refinancing and sale of bonds to raise capital, finance continuing infrastructure work, and acquisition of capital equipment.
Okay. The first thing I'm handing out is the projects that we're wanting to do in our continuing infrastructure and capital projects. And to further continue, I have with us today Kevin McKenna from Steer Financial, who is our financial advisor. I think most of you are familiar with him. And Bob Bale from Bernardi Securities, and they're handing out some information on transactions. And I think I'm going to turn it over to them to give you an idea of the size of the issue and exactly what we're doing. We're doing some refunding of existing bonds for savings and for restructuring the issues to kind of keep the tax levy in line. And then we're also raising some new money to do the projects that are on the list that I said on.
Well, Bob will go through the details. I was just going to give the same introduction Jim did. I mean, basically, we want to do this because we want to reduce costs, and so there are some bonds there at higher interest rates that we can refund and save some money. You want to raise some new money for capital projects, and then finally, but all of this is in the context of having a known and level tax rate. There's some blips right now, and we want to do some planning so the level tax rate for debt stays at $1.55 for several years and then drops, so that if there are new projects later on, it's affordable without any kind of tax rate shocks. So that's really what the goals are here. Refunding is about $15 million. New money is about $10 million based on the projects that the city has come up with. And with that, I think Bob can go through the details.
Yeah. First couple pages that are passed out is where the city stands right now on the city's outstanding debt and what we're projecting the tax levy to be. And what we're looking at restructuring and refunding are the first four issues that are shown on page 1. That'd be your 97 issue, the 98 issue, 99 issue, and 2008 issue, and also a utility issue that was done in 1999 as well. If you look at page 2, this kind of goes over what Kevin was stating regarding the tax levy for the bonds spiking up here in the next few years. That last column shows currently the city's about $1.54, and that spikes up in tax year 11 and 12 to almost $1.80. So what we were looking at doing was trying to put in some new money, restructure those 4 issues I just mentioned, level off your tax rate, and also issue that debt at a lower interest rate, so you recognize the present value savings, plus able to do the new money, keep that rate at $1.55 or less, and leave a window for opportunities in the future. We're not going to see that spike up again. So if you turn to page 3, this is the actual new structure that we're looking at doing, all laid out. And if you look at those columns in green, those are the same issues I had mentioned that we're restructuring. You can see the net interest rate we're projecting on all of them from 2.68, the shortest maturity, to 4.06 is a lot lower than currently what's outstanding on those bonds, which was anywhere from 4.47 to over 5.5%. And really what that means to you is even after the restructuring, extending out some of the debt, but we're trying to minimize that as much as possible, the city's still recognizing a present value savings of almost $300,000 just with the restructuring of this debt. Now, if you look at page 4, we also include the refunding of the utility bond issue that was done in '99. We're able to issue that at almost, or about 3.25%, and we're saving almost $500,000. Now, that's with some money that you currently have in your reserve, your debt service reserve that we're able to apply. It's still some significant savings up front for the city.
Just from the 99
Just the 99
utility issue.
Yeah, the way that's outstanding now is a revenue bond issue, so there's money set aside in a reserve account. You're able to refund that with the city's general obligation backing, get rid of the reserve account, take some of that money, put it towards the refunding, so you're able to lower your payments, especially up front. That's the way we had structured it, and you're saving over $500,000 with the majority of that coming in the first 2 years. And the other 2 green columns there, the 2009A and then the utility 2009A, that's the new money portion that we put into the issue. And the 2009A is for the infrastructure for general corporate purposes, which generates $7.8 million in new money. And then the utility generates $2 million in new money, so about 9.8, with the total issuance being about $10 million.
$10 million.
And what we're looking at doing, if you look at that last column, if you remember, or if you go back to page 2 and compare the bond levy rate for the 2 years, what we're able to do is drop that down, especially where that spiked up to almost $1.80. We're at $1.55 in the next couple of years, and then that slowly comes down, which leaves a window for new projects here in the next couple of years, where we can layer that on top of this and keep that levy at $1.55. And this is assuming a pretty conservative 3% growth rate in your EAV, which has been conservative over the last 10 years. So we're not assuming any crazy growth or anything like that. So I think we're being conservative.
The last 10 years has exceeded a growth rate of 3% EAV?
I think I went back 8 years and you're almost at 5%.
So that is pretty conservative.
Yeah, you're being conservative. So that's kind of it laid out. All the different purposes. There's a lot of moving parts. I didn't know if there's any questions on that before I moved ahead. And if not, I can get into where the bond market is today. Which is if you look at page 5, this is just a snapshot of the 20-year 20-year general obligation bond index. And just over the last year, you see it's all over the place. Really before everything kind of fell apart in September, rates were relatively low, really almost all-time low. And then it spiked way up. And for really the fourth quarter of last year, interest rates were really high. We weren't recommending anybody really do any issues unless they had to. And then here the first part of the year, it dropped way down, almost to where it was at. And it's kind of leveled off the last couple of months. You know, the 20-year bonds, which is what the city's going to be issuing. And really, since we've been discussing this with Jim and the administration since the end of January, we haven't really seen any jump or any major drop in interest rates. It's been pretty steady. We're looking at starting pricing these bonds the end of this week, so we're not foreseeing any big changes in the rates we're presenting tonight. Those rates are actually page 6 and 7. Now we have the issues broken into two pieces, the refunding and the new money. And the $10 million, which is page 6, is actually the new money. They were going out to full 20 years. And as you can see, the payments are up and down because the reason for that is we're putting that basically into the puzzle of the city's outstanding debt to keep that levy below the $1.55. And just taking that debt out a full 20 years, because a lot of these projects have a useful life in the full 20 years, so why not borrow for maximum 20 years, especially since rates are still pretty low. Now page 7, that's the refunding series. That's series 2009B, and this is the $15 million piece. And this piece is shorter, goes out to 2025. We tried to keep it as short as possible to increase your savings. And currently those are the interest rates we're looking at. And also, as you can see there, a lot of that is up front, big payments up front, and then it falls off. The way the city has structured your debt historically has been a pretty short maturity schedule, and what we're trying to do is just keep that basically uniform with what it was before. Keep that savings up. And then the last page, I just put kind of a timeline together to show you where we're at today, and then what steps are necessary before the closing. Now we met March 4th, kind of discussed everything, and then since then have kind of been putting everything together on the structure. The people that are involved are your financial advisor, which is Kevin and Spear, underwriter, which is Bernardi Securities, that's who I represent. Bond counsel is Chapman Cutler, my bond counsel on all your previous issues. And then, of course, the issuer is you, and that's coded at the bottom, just to see the steps that are taken and who really the responsibility is or who the action is actually taken by. Now, as you can see, March 24th, there was a rating call with the city and with Spear, and that was with Standard & Poor's. As you remember before, you had an A rating, which is an underlying rating of the city. They look at various economic factors, financial factors, demographics, things like that, and they reaffirmed that rating to them for an A. So even in these economic times, you're able to keep that A rating, which is a strong rating.
Is this a time when other municipalities may not be holding their ratings?
We've definitely seen some drops in some ratings because a lot of financial pictures are seeing sales taxes just drop dramatically. Economic factors, which always aren't the control of the village or municipality, they've gone in the toilet too. So to hold on to your rating with the A, which was a solid rating, I think that was, especially in this economy, I think that was a great benefit. Yeah. I know they praised your finances and they praised your debt burden's not bad, it's short. The only negatives were kind of the demographics, which you don't really have a lot of control.
And Moody's has put out a memo saying they expect to see a lot of downgrades this year. So keeping your own is really good.
So with an A rating, that rating drops, especially now. Investors before and you would issue bonds, you have your underlying rating, but then you have bond insurance on top of that. A lot of times the investors were just looking at bond insurance. They didn't even really look at the underlying credit. Now there's only a couple bond insurers left. It's still important, but the investors are looking more at the underlying credit of the actual bond issuer. So having a solid A credit, that's going to definitely reflect in your interest rates. If you're dropping below an A, then you're issuing in this market. It's difficult to get competitive interest rates. So that was March. That was last week. So we've got that finalized. The official statement, bond ordinance are being pulled together. We're here tonight, and hopefully tomorrow we have the bond insurance quotes, final sizings, kind of pull everything together tomorrow. And then we're going to start pricing or mailing out to our clients the official statement, having some preliminary calls on Wednesday, start the full pricing on Thursday. The final pricing coming Monday before your meeting, before the board meeting, or the council meeting, and have everything finalized for your ordinance that night. And once that's passed, interest rates and everything are then locked in. And then we're shooting to close on April 22nd, which gives you a couple weeks to get all the documents signed. That's when the new money would be transferred, and really the other bond issues would basically be taken off the books.
Given that presentation, Kevin, do you, as our financial advisor, any comments on the wisdom of going out 20 years, 16 years?
No, we've been looking at these numbers off and on, over the past couple months, and I think that, as Bob said, you're looking at some long-term projects. And so it's really normal to match your assets with your liabilities. And so that's just good thing to do. And that also gives you a good base, because my focus on this has been this the tax rate. And I think that the tax rate that is targeted on page 4 is going to be really good. And Jim and I talked about this for you. $1.55 dropping down to $1.46 or 47 or whatever. Because that gives you room. The city has a history of every 3 years needing capital for your projects. So this gives you room. So 3 years from now, you would have room to do additional debt. If there's some sort of a wonderful windfall and, the money comes out of the helicopters from Washington and you don't need to do any debt, then you can always prepay some of these things, or you can always, or you reduce the taxes, whatever it is. You've got some options. And that's, I think, what's important about this, having this all scheduled so it gives you plenty of flexibility 3 years from now at a relatively good cost. The table that Bob showed about the interest rates going up and down, that's all fine, and then it is the history. My main thing here is you look at these and you look at the actual interest rates we're talking about. We're still talking about interest rates in the mid 4% range, averaging in the mid 4% range. And that's really where we've seen sales over the past 10 years, in the low to mid 4% range. It's a good time. You might as well just lock that stuff in. We're not talking about 5.5s and the 6s, which people were paying in September if they want to sell bonds. And so I think this is a decent time to lock in those kinds of rates, given what your project is and given where their market is. Because there's a lot of concern about when the Fed gets done stimulating the economy, how stimulated will the economy be, and where is inflation going to be? Now, right now, the articles are running about 3 for inflation and 1 for deflation. But at some point, it's going to be we're going to all look back and say, gee, we should have believed all those inflationary things. I have no idea whether that's going to be this year, next year, the following year, but at some point, I think the 4% range is going to be out of reach. Don't quote.
I just wrote that down.
Yeah.
And I put quotation marks around it.
Yeah.
Should I not do that? Okay. Are there any questions?
There's a couple things, and maybe Dave can jump in here. One of the issues that we're looking at, especially when we talk to the top part of the projects, is the Brookmont Boulevard Viaduct. As you well know, we've talked about that for some time. And that's quickly coming where we're pretty soon we'll really have to have money to do that. one of the things that gave us the impetus to start looking at the bonding issues was that obligation that the city was going to have. As you all know, we have to pay 20% of that project cost, and that project cost probably is estimated by Tyson Engineering is somewhere around $18 million. We've got about $10 million in the bank or banked right now towards that project, but you know ours is 20% of 18 million or 3.6. So right off the top, that has to be obligated to that. And then when you begin looking at some of the other projects that we have, and they're just our normal infrastructure projects, and I think everyone sitting in this room knows the situation with the streets in the community. We had, again, a terrible winter, and we've got some major repairs to make on streets, which are not just an overlay, but we're going to have to rebuild some, and we've done that. I mean, as you all know, we've done Wall Street, we've done Main Street, we did Grinnell Road, we've done lots of projects where we've completely rebuilt them, which leads to what Kevin is saying, that these are 20-year projects because we're investing money into those. But as you look at those, that money certainly can go in a hurry. Capital equipment, of course, that there's always a need for that as we need to replace vehicles and some of the major equipment. I'll let Dick speak to the utility projects, but they're not small numbers either. And so we thought it was very prudent to look at this time and get something into place. No matter who the next administration is going to be, the monies are absolutely necessary to do the projects that need to be done and continuing with what we started some 12 years ago anyway. I don't think we certainly want to go back on any of the projects, but Dick can speak to the ones on the utility because they're expensive also.
Well, before we do that, we have the city projects at the top of the list there. Is there anybody, have any questions about that? Any comments?
So where's the resource center?
Was that the sidewalk rehabilitation?
Sidewalk rehabilitation, yes.
The broken sidewalks in front of the armory.
Yes.
And this is going to impact all areas of the city, not just one particular locale, favoring any particular.
Again, on the rehab for sidewalks and streets or curb and gutters, I don't think there's been a time that we have not uniformly done that between all 7 boards of the city. I mean, that's, to me, is the only way to do it. So.
Yeah, but you're correct.
And if I could add on Berkman Boulevard, part of the urgency or need to do this too is that the mayor said we do have to match 20% of the cost of it. We have an FCC order that gave us $8.1 million. We were able to get that increased up to $10.1 million, which helps the cost for the city. But we're on a timeline of when this has to be done, when we have to spend. So they're looking to make sure the city has their obligation. I mean, we're still looking everywhere else, you know, federally, even from Canadian National, everywhere else we can to get money. But unless we can show them that we have the match, they always could pull the 10.1, and that's what we don't want to have happen. And the project is moving along pretty well right now. So it is important that this is part of that.
So we're looking to fund the full 20% match from the bond issue, 3.6 million.
If we're fortunate enough that we do not have to, you know, that we find other funds, then we certainly can roll that money into any infrastructure project we want. I was talking to Dave last week, and we were talking about Brookmont Boulevard from Schuyler Avenue to Route 50. I mean, you told me when that street was built.
It was built in 1973.
All right, so it's 30-some years old. It needs rebuilding. I mean, there's no question about it. So,
you know, that was the first project I did when I came to work for the city, so that's how long it was.
Yeah, that was the first year I was on council.
That's why I remember.
And the street's all ours, right?
Pardon me?
The Brookmont Boulevard's all ours.
Unfortunately, Berkman Boulevard is all of Kankakee's.
It's so nice to split that one.
I
Can we
know.
trade that to Bradley?
I don't think
For,
yeah,
for what?
I think we're on a trade.
Okay, any other questions on city projects? If not, utility projects? Any
Utility
comments?
borrowed money in '99, was the last time we borrowed money. for capital improvements. And our capital improvements are three categories. We have 100 miles of sanitary sewers under the city, as some of you know, dating back to 1800, some of them 1880, 1890, all the way up to the 1960s in various states of repair or disrepair. We have over 20 pumping stations, and we have a lot of sewer cleaning equipment. We've also added the hydroelectric plant, and believe it or not, that's been operating now for almost 15 years, and we have had to do some rework on the two of the turbines, which we've been able to handle with existing funds. That third one we don't have the funds for. So what this does, it replenishes our reserves. The reason we've gotten by for 10 years is because some of you know the city sold some of its capacity at the regional treatment plant to the village of Urban A. And those millions of dollars have been keeping us going for all these years. It's been very nice for the ratepayers because we have been able to basically sell that equity and haven't had to borrow money. And we've reached a point where we have projects that have to be undertaken. And a lot of them are geared toward the south, which is, of course, the growth area of the city. The 4552 sewer conditions that we just found have deteriorated, that's where a lot of the new development's being proposed. The Kensington pumping station reroute, what that is right now, that's actually pumped across the tracks and into a system which overloads that Gar Creek station, which serves the entire, all the way down to the sheriff's complex. It goes to one pumping station. The industrial park, all the development, the Walmart, Hilton, all of that. That's the 3 pump stations pumping that way. So we're going to reroute Kensington and send it a different direction. Northland sewer, that's the industrial park, Northland Industrial Park.
Off the now.
And that station is struggling to keep up with the industrial use. So we're going to build a kind of a relief sewer to move some of that down to a big interceptor we built, I'd say in the last 6-7 years. We built that interceptor that would take some of the pressure off the growth to the northeast. So most of these projects are just enhancing the system. We are asking to replace one of our Vectors. Those are the big trucks you see driving with the tanks and the big, looks like a nose on the front. We have 2. One of them's I think 4 years old. This one is now 91, and they simply get worn out. They're used every day to clean sanitary sewers. We clean about 40 miles a year. So we try to live on a 3-year cycle, so everybody's sewer gets cleaned once in every 3-year period. So basic needs for the utility. I mean, our only other resource here would be to raise the rates substantially, which I don't think that the city council would be in favor of, and I don't think they're in favor of. So this way, by borrowing, we can spread this cost over a few years and recover that cost through smaller incremental rate increases, which is typically what we've done. Some of you may remember last time we raised rates, we did a 3-year incremental increase. Instead of a big jump, we took it up 5% each year.
When was the last time you did that?
97, May 1, May 1, 2007, the rates went up 5%. May 1, 2008, and then May 1, 2009, it will go up the 3rd step. And then there's no more increases programmed. We will relook at that after we see what these funds can do for us. We may not have to necessarily raise rates next year, but we do an audit every year. We're required by ordinance and by the fact that we still took that federal money. You know, the user charge system, we have no choice. We still have one revenue bond, and the revenue bond requires that the users pay the full cost. There can be no subsidy. As long as there's that revenue bond and those covenants, we have to show coverage, which is we meet all of our O&M, all of our debt service reserves, and have 20% in excess. And that's in the covenant. So we always have to have rates that protect the bondholders primarily. Questions on those projects? Nothing real glamorous, to tell you the truth.
Any other outstanding projects do you envision for the future?
Well, yes, where we're headed is where everyone in the metropolitan area is headed. The regional treatment plant is being inundated with clean water. And you may have read about the flood, and some of you are on the Karma board. I think where we're headed, the permit's coming up in July, and I think you're going to see that Karma is going to be directed to tell their member communities to find and eliminate this clean water. And that's easy to say, but very difficult to do. So we're all going to be looking at more smoke testing and more investigation and more sewer tightening. So I think as we move forward, you're going to have to spend more and more money on sewer rehab.
Any other questions or any other comments?
Question. Do you have how much these projects cost?
We have a list of that.
We have the list, so they've already been.
We've categorized, and that's how we sized it by those costs.
And I believe they're also restricted to certain categories.
Well, in order for the city to issue tax-exempt debt, we have to spend it for qualified projects, and those would be of a capital nature, long-term nature. We can't spend it for operating costs of the city, those types of costs. So, yeah, we're restricted that way. If we spend it other than that, then we lose, then the bondholders lose the tax-exempt nature of the bonds and the benefit they have for that, and that would have adverse ramifications on the city. This will require that the mayor engage with bond counsel to for Chapman and Cutler to represent us, and I'll have a resolution or some form of authorization for the council on Monday to enact authorizing the mayor to engage with bond counsel to, and possibly from financial advisors.
Continuing.
Okay. I know we've done it in the past.
So the action that we're looking for here is a motion to approve the issuance of the bonds, to recommend City Council on Monday night that we issue the bonds, and basically adopt the programs, the projects that we have here on the 2009 financing proposal. Nothing binding on our action tonight, but we're recommending City Council that we adopt the bond ordinance and issue the bonds.
I'll make that form of a motion, Mr. Chairman.
Is there a second?
I second it.
Is there any discussion on the motion?
It's good for our people.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Great. Thank you.
You need to do the Chapman and Cutler letter, so you need to approve that, recommend that to council.
Is there, okay, that we engage Chapman and Cutler as our bond counsel?
I'll second the motion.
Okay, I saw it.
Okay. Motion to hire the lawyers, which is always a good motion.
We gotta eat right out.
And move to second that Chapman and Cutler is the preeminent bond counsel in the state of Illinois. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay. Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Kevin.
See you Monday night.
Thanks, Bob.
Next item that we'll deal with is a request from developer Pearl for TIF consideration.
Yes.
The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to come out and talk to you this afternoon. I'm David Young with Pearl Developers. We are a for-profit developer based in Cleveland, Ohio, and we have proposed a 50-unit, 3-story mid-rise building for seniors on South Gordon Street, just off of Court Street, here in Kankakee, in Alderman Hunter's district. And we had requested benefits from the city in order to, as part of the funding request, we're going to be looking for affordable housing tax credits from the Illinois Housing Development Authority, as well as home funds from IDA. And as part of the program for tax credits, any type of benefit that we can show from the city in the form of either a tax break or a TIF benefit, or even a reduction or a waiver in fees for example, water or sewer connection rates, can be beneficial and make the application more competitive. So we had come and asked the mayor, and the mayor asked us to come and speak with you regarding that issue.
Is there, the proposal, as I recall, is a senior citizen.
Yes.
Is there, are you changing that any? Has there been a change
What we
in that?
have done is we have looked to include 10 units for grandparents that are raising grandchildren. And the reason that we did that is because we have found a tremendous need for that type of program. If I can just quote from, we had a market study done for this particular development. And in the market area, which is considered Kankakee County, there are 2,019 grandparents that are living with their grandchildren. This is grandchildren that are under 18 years of age.
Give me that number again, baby.
2019. And of that 2019, there are 1,193 grandparent households in which the grandparent is directly responsible for the grandchildren. And this represents a 16% gain over the number of households reported in the 2000 census. So it's estimated that for the income ranges that we are looking at, that there are 400 age and income qualified grandfamily households in this market area. And what we're looking to do is 10 units. When we originally went to the Plan Commission meeting, we talked about a building for seniors only. We were looking at the possibility of including these grandfamily units, but we weren't sure of the viability at that time. And so we did not want to bring that up until we had done all the research and had determined that it was viable for this marketplace. And as I said, with those statistics, there are certainly a large number of people that can benefit from this. Our partner in this development is Kankakee County Housing Development Corporation, which is the subsidiary of the Kankakee County Housing Authority. Both the executive director and the board are supportive of this and know that there is a need for this type of housing in the community. As a matter of fact, Randy McGill, the executive director, indicated that there are probably more than 10 households like this already living in housing authority units. One of the concerns that always comes up about populations are how are people going to be picked, and we are going to have a referral and screening process for this. I remember having a conversation with Alderman Hunter a couple of months ago about including Section 8 subsidies, and as he said then, and it's true now, is that the key is the application and the screening of the applicants that are going to be coming into the development. And as part of the screening process, we are bringing in an organization called the Renaissance Collaborative, which is a not-for-profit based in Chicago, which has a lot of experience in planning grandfamily and intergenerational housing, and they're in the process of putting the funds together to build a senior campus, including units for grandparents raising grandchildren. Pat Abrams, the executive director, has a number of years of experience in working with intergenerational households. In addition, she received a fellowship and was able to spend a year traveling around the country looking at the different programs that had been set up to help grandparents raising grandchildren and to incorporate those ideas. And so we brought the Renaissance Collaborative and Pat Abrams into the team so that they can help with, for example, the design of the development, that they can assist with putting together the referral and screening plan, and then also assist with putting together a suite of services. And since I mentioned that, I want to talk about the different services that are already available in the community for this population. There is, through the National Family Caregiver Act, there are funds that are distributed to each state. In this particular state, they're provided to the Department on Aging and to the Area Agency on Aging. And those funds are then dispersed to organizations to provide services in the community. In this particular community, it's Catholic Charities of the Diocese of Joliet. And so they are providing a suite of services including respite care, so that, for example, if a grandparent needs an opportunity to do some errands or take a break, that there are funds that are available to provide for child care so that they can go and run errands or do something else. There are also support groups that are available, and we've talked with Catholic Charities about actually offering the support groups in the building. Furthermore, Catholic Charities has case management services where a person can call in and they can receive information and referrals on different services that are available through the community. We've met with the Area Agency on Aging about this particular development, and they are extremely enthusiastic about it. We've met with the Illinois State Department on Aging, their Grand Family Task Force, and they are extremely excited about it. And we are also looking to do the same type of development in the town of Normal. We're doing a 50-unit building there with 10 units for Grand Family units, and the town has been very supportive. I want to, if you don't mind, read just a little bit. I have a letter that we received from the Northeastern Illinois Area Agency on Aging, and some of you may know Lucia West Jones, its executive director. Let's see here. Our agency supports efforts to increase the number of available affordable senior housing units located in Kankakee County, and we particularly are supportive of the separate units provided for those seniors who are raising grandchildren. We appreciate the opportunity to review and comment on the proposed development and look forward to the development becoming a reality in these difficult economic times. I also wanted to share with you, I brought copies of the plan so that you have a chance to see how this would be configured. And I have 10 copies. I apologize if I didn't bring enough.
Mr. Young, may I ask a question?
Certainly.
I was at the planning board when
Yes.
you proposed this project.
Yes.
And I think one of the concerns they had at that time, and this was prior to these 10 units with grandparents and children, was that there was going to be no on-site management. Have you changed your thoughts about that?
At this one, there actually is the consideration for having on-site management.
But let's not deal with semantics here, consideration. It's not a commitment.
Well, ultimately, it's the housing authority, it's the Kankakee County Housing Development Corporation that's going to own the development. So ultimately, they will decide about having a full-time manager present.
But if we were not, just to piggyback on Alderman Epstein's comments, and I agree, if indeed you had on-site management, I think we as a council feel more comfortable with that kind of setup as opposed to just relying on the housing authority.
I understand.
But only because that was an issue when it was going to be over 55. And I think it was discussed at length because everyone was assured at that time it was only going to be over 55. And I remember specifically us discussing children. And you know, children bring an entirely different mix to a development as far as safety and security. And, you know, I don't know the legalities, but I certainly would feel more comfortable with having, I don't know if we can call it a guarantee, that there would be on-site management. I just think that that's something that I would certainly be strongly in favor of. This may not be the opportune time to speak to this issue, but I mean, I really think I think it should be integral into this development, to be quite honest with you.
And Mr. Young, when you had gone to the planning board, it was, 55 and older. Will you be returning and letting them know this, because I know that was a big concern, that, the children, because you do then have to plan for a lot of different amenities.
And we are planning for those types of amenities for example, tot lots, so that there will be recreation for children, and that those activities will be separate and distinct from recreation and outdoor areas for the seniors. We are very sensitive to the fact that we are dealing with two populations here. But what we have found in our research, and especially from talking with seniors, as a matter of fact, I had the opportunity to participate in a focus group with grandparents that are raising grandchildren in Normal just a couple of weeks ago. And some of the things that we learned from the grandparents were that they are not comfortable in traditional family developments because there generally aren't persons there of their age group. So it increases their alienation and isolation. And they much prefer the idea of being in an environment where they can have access to other seniors, to people in their peer group. And certainly a lot of attention is paid to children in the grandparent raising grandchildren situation, but we also feel that there has to be attention paid to the grandparents, and that it's very important that the physical and mental health of the grandparents be paid attention to, because overall, the healthier that those grandparents are, the better it's going to be for the stability of those grandchildren. So in an environment like this, where the grandparents have the ability to interact with other grandparents, is going to be better for them, certainly mentally. And then, of course, the other hope is that we are talking about a population of 55 plus. And so while we say senior citizen, I mean 55 is not really old.
I don't think so either.
No.
I was concerned about that.
No.
I mean, I thought about this the other day because in August I'll turn 40. So it means 15 years hence I could be living in the building, and I am not going to think of myself as old 15 years from now. I mean, I haven't got married and had kids yet, so I don't consider myself. So, but we have a lot of active and engaged people that still have a lot to offer. And one of the hopes is, and this was something that came from the grandparents that we spoke to, is that while they don't have to, but that maybe some of the other independent seniors that are living in the building will be interested in serving as mentors and tutors to those, to the grandchildren that are living in the building. I want to point out, if you look at the first floor building plan, which should be page number 4. No. I didn't staple them, but I turned them so that you should, looks like that. It should be there you go. What we've done in this building, and we've done this on all floors, is we have looked to create a separation between the population. So if you look at the right side of the drawing, and you'll see where you'll see the numbers 2 and you'll see the numbers 3, and in between that you'll see what looks like a door in that corridor. That is a locking door. That door remains locked, and the only way to get beyond that is with key card access. And so the building is going to be designed for key card access on all floors, so that way the grandparent units remain separate and distinct from the independent units in the building. You will also notice in looking at the second and third floors that we have created separate community spaces for the different populations as well. For example, on the third floor, you'll notice that there is an intergenerational lounge and an intergenerational media center for computers and televisions and so on. And those are kept separate from the lounges and the community space for the independent seniors. And that, of course, is because we know that if you're trying to watch television, you certainly don't want kids running around in a circle or while you're trying to talk. So that's why we felt it was important to provide those separate spaces for those two populations.
Mr. Young, you
Yes.
also said that you've identified, you did the studies, and that there are certainly 400 qualified senior citizens / multi-generational families who would be able to come into this building. Do you know, where are they living now? Are they in homes? Are they renting? You know, where would they be moving from to move into this building?
It can be persons that are currently renting in other places that would look to move here. It could also be seniors that are owners that are going to look to sell and move into this type of environment. Again, from the support group, a number of seniors told us that they would love to have an opportunity like this because it is difficult for them to provide for children and to provide the ongoing maintenance that is needed for a property, for a house, especially on a fixed income.
So would everybody be Section 8?
No, not necessarily. Now, the income guidelines are set up because we're using the Affordable Housing Tax Credit Program. It means that the individuals that are targeted for this building would be between 30% and 60% of the area median income, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have a Section 8 certificate to live there.
And I know this is a technical question that may not even be relevant, but I know, because I work for the school district, and we obviously have many grandparents who have custody of their children, of their grandchildren. And I know we need them to stipulate, they need to prove to us that they are the legal guardians of these children. Will they have to do the same thing in order to live in this facility?
Yes. The housing law requires that that legal custody be established before they can reside there. And so that's another part of the screening process that helps with this building, is because you're looking at individuals who have gone through the process to secure legal custody. And then also another question that we get quite often is well, what happens when mom or dad comes back? Mom and dad can't live in the apartment. They cannot reside with the family. That would be a violation of the lease. Most apartment complexes will have a guest policy where someone can stay for a week or for 2 weeks, and then beyond that you can be in violation of the terms of your lease, and that is the same thing that would take place here.
When you go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, but without on-site, personnel, then you may not be aware of that.
Well, that's certainly true. That's possible. But whether there is on-site or not, it's not a building. None of these buildings are where you never have any person there, that there'd never be anybody from the Housing Development Corporation there. For example, you've got ongoing maintenance that's taking place, you've got landscaping that's taking place, you've got all sorts of activities that are taking place in the building, so there's always someone from the Housing Development Corporation that is there and watching what's going on in the building.
So the answer to the question about supervision was, to summarize it, is what will there be on-site supervision? Question. You're not willing to commit? Well, you can't
Well,
commit.
I can't commit.
Okay.
I would,
That's what
if I were in the position to commit, I certainly would commit. But as I said, we are the developer, so we are going to build the building, but ultimately it would be the Housing Development Corporation that's going to run the building. What we have put in the budget is our funds for a full-time manager.
And what assurance does the city have that the restraints in the lease that you've discussed would continue to be there, not only during the first year of the project, but as we go along?
With affordable housing tax credits, one of the requirements is we have to sign an extended use agreement, and that extended use agreement says that you must keep the building for this population for at least 30 years.
But, and I understand that, but number one, how do we know that there would be no more than 20% family, grand family? That's what the proposal is now. How would we know that there would be a restraint in the lease, for instance, that the parents can't come back and live there? I mean, you just described that that'll be in the lease, so that if the parents come live, they can stay a week, but they got to take off after
Right.
that.
In this case, there would be a guest policy, and that person would be considered a guest, whether they are a blood relative or not.
I understand you're saying that, but how do we know that, and how do we as a city know that that will continue to be the case as the years progress?
Well, once it was put into the lease, there'd be no reason to take that out. And I'm not, I mean, what I think the best way for me to answer that question is first to ask one to you, which is, what would you want to see as an assurance as far as that lease is concerned?
I'd have to give that some thought, but I'd like to know what teeth it would have if we would ask for that assurance.
Well, I mean, the lease, of course, is a contract, and if that individual is in violation of the lease, they can be subject to eviction. And so it's certainly in the Housing Development Corporation's best interest to put that into the contract, because it then gives them the right not just to remove the mother or the father, but any guest that were overstaying their welcome.
But it's still every new tenant has a new lease, and it's a for-profit endeavor, so that you can change the lease whenever you want to. I mean, I would think, right? And I'm not attributing any motives to you, but I'm just saying, from an oversight point of view, that's a question the city thinks of.
Sure, and I can understand that. In the developments that I have seen, there has not been a change in the lease like that, mainly because of the restrictions that are put in place at the time of application. It limits. We're putting together a document that is nearly Old Testament in size, that spells out the financing for the program, it spells out the population, shows the zoning, shows all the components of this. And so it spells out very clearly that this is the population that's going to be served. And I think that one of the questions that was asked was, for example, how would you know that that it's always going to be 20% for grand family? Again, as part of the extended use restriction, we are required to meet that. So you would never see that number go up.
And the significance of the extended use restriction is that that's part of the deal with
it's part of the deal with the Housing Development Authority. So, for example, we're using, just as the gentleman who were here talking about finances a few minutes ago, we're using tax credits, but essentially it's very similar to how the bonds operate. And if anything were done that were in violation of the agreement that was established between the Housing Development Corporation as owners of this development and the Housing Development Authority, then the Housing Development Authority can come back, or the IRS more specifically, because they are the ultimate grantor of the credit, they could come back and say, you have violated the terms of the agreement, or therefore we are not going to recognize these tax credits, which means that all the investors who invested thinking they were going to get a credit now have to pay taxes.
So the 20% is built into that?
It's built into that.
To the fundamental
because
extension of the credit.
The Housing Development Corporation has two interests. One, they have an interest in making sure that the city is happy, because the Housing Development Corporation is presumably going to want to do additional development for the benefit of the city. And so they're going to want to make sure that they are doing things that are in the city's interest. But even more so, they're going to want to make sure that they are doing something that is in those tax credit holders' interest. Because if the tax credits, if the tax holders had to pay those taxes, they're going to come after the Housing Development Corporation as the owner. And certainly the Housing Development Corporation doesn't want to be on the hook for having to pay those credits back because someone overstayed their welcome by 3 weeks.
Mr. Young,
Yes.
I noticed that there's a 3-bedroom apartment configuration.
Yes.
Is there a restriction on the number of children that a grandparent may bring into the development?
The expectation is that in a 3-bedroom unit that there could be a maximum of 3 children. So there could be 2 in one room and 1 in the other.
So that would be the maximum?
Yes. Yes.
What happens when the grandchildren go back to the parents or grow up and matriculate out? I assume you want to keep the 10 units available for grand families.
Correct.
Obviously, some kids will move on and the grandparents will be alone. Will they have to move out of those units then?
Well, that's another reason why we look to combine the two populations, because for example, say a senior living in the Azzarelli Tower, in a 1-bedroom in the tower, all of a sudden we're told, you're going to have to take over responsibility for raising your 2 grandchildren. Where do they go? They can't remain in Azzarelli, correct? So they'd have to go rent somewhere else. So in this situation, with this building, they could come and they could potentially rent one of those units. Once the grandchildren matriculate out, they then have the opportunity of moving to the independent side of the building and getting a 1 or a 2-bedroom, whichever is their preference, which means that they can stay in a place that they are used to. They can stay in a place where they already have a peer group, where they already know people, and it helps to increase that stabilization.
But they have to vacate their multi-generational unit, correct?
If they're...
If the kids are gone.
Right, if the kids are gone.
Because
You want that unit available.
you want that unit available, and again, I go back to my dealings with the school district. I don't think, and I don't mean this in any disrespect, but I see this, children come in and out of those households sometimes on a monthly basis. The parents come back, they want the kids, they take the kids, they're gone for 6 months, then they decide they don't want the kids, they bring them back to the grandparents. I mean, this could be a constant state of flux as far as some of these units go. Do you know what I'm saying? Regardless of how well you screen, and I certainly don't mean this, I just have lived it, and I just see how parents take these children in and out of these homes without any regard for the child. And again, I think of a grandparent who's now in a unit with, for children. Then they're at the mercy of their own children with these grandchildren. Do you understand what I'm saying? And I guess it's hard to understand how this is all going to work out.
Well, when the grandparents have legal custody of the grandchildren, as it would be required for this building, isn't that a violation of custody if the parents then take the grandchildren?
Yes, it is, but unless the grandparent chooses to pursue that, it's not an issue, quite honestly, because remember, ultimately they're dealing with their own children, in this whole mix. And so, you know, sure, some grandparents become very attached, not just emotionally, but because of the welfare of the child. And they would fight that kind of a situation. Others, quite honestly, do it for convenience. And they take the legal responsibility of the children, I've noticed, without fully understanding the legal ramifications of what all that entails.
Sure.
And so I guess the screening process, I would hope, would be one that is best as you can predict.
Yes.
A grandparent that we're not a family that this is a chaos.
Yes.
It's not reigning in the family.
Exactly. And again, this is a reason why we felt that it was important to bring in a consultant that has the experience, that can help with the planning for the application and screening, as well as the supportive services. And the contract with the Renaissance Collaborative is currently set up where the Renaissance Collaborative will be there and will be a part of this process through the lease-up of the building. And as it's currently planned, this application goes in a couple of days. We then will find out if we receive the funding in July. Construction would start on the building in 2010, and then lease-up would begin in 2011. So it means that the Renaissance Collaborative has the ability of working with the Housing Development Corporation from July of 2009 through lease-up to full rent-up with the Housing Development Corporation on the referral and the screening, and to make sure that if there are any issues, that those issues can be dealt with quickly and effectively.
I can ask two questions, David. You talked about the 400 units or 400 families with children. How many are out there are 55 and over that would qualify? How many? What's that number?
All of those that I listed.
Okay. And secondarily...
They're all guardians?
And they're all guardians.
Okay. The second part of my question is, what does our ordinance say when you got your zoning? Does it allow you to, is it all 55 and only, seniors only? I believe that's what our ordinance says.
Well, your ordinance says for, it says for an independent,
I didn't bring it, so...
Oh, no, it says for an independent assisted living facility.
But it seemed like at that meeting that they were really concerned about the age,
And I understand when the Planning Commission met that they were looking to see if there were any type of legal restriction or legal covenant that they could put in place to restrict the age to 55 plus.
Now, did you meet, like, was that January or February? And when did you come up with the concept then for the grandparents?
We were working on the grandparent concept. We started looking at it earlier this year, and I believe it was in late January that we spoke to the Plan Commission. And at the time, we did not know enough about the viability of the program. We did not know enough about the viability of the program in order to discuss it with the Plan Commission. Once we determined that this was something that we wanted to pursue, we did approach the mayor, and we also approached Alderman Hunter and Alderman Brown to express what we wanted to look to do. And really, our development is just outside of the TIF district boundaries. It is actually the western boundary is our eastern property line. So we don't qualify for the TIF. But even, for example, if the City of Kankakee said, we will give you a $15 waiver on your sewer connection fee, then that counts as leverage, and makes the application more competitive.
That's your points.
Yes.
Well,
Can I ask a question? Do you mind?
sure, go ahead.
There are 2-bedroom units in the senior area,
Yes.
And what?
and then the 10 units are restricted to a certain area with children.
Yes.
And the housing authority, the housing development authority, is that the housing authority, or is that just a company called the Housing Development Authority?
The Kankakee County Housing Development Corporation is a not-for-profit subsidiary of the Kankakee County Housing Authority.
So in reality, the housing authority owns this building?
In reality, the subsidiary of the Housing Authority owns this building, the Kankakee County Housing Development Corporation.
Okay.
And I just want to add that when we first came to town looking at the possibility of doing a development and asking about a partner, the city informed us that we should seriously consider working with the Housing Authority because of what they have done and the role that they serve in the community.
And my other question is, I'm pretty familiar with fair housing laws. And I remember some Diversity Inc. meetings where certain cases were brought forward about mobile home parks that had senior areas, and a grandparent let grandchildren move into those areas. And the housing authority, well, the mobile home park had to keep those children there. It was kind of a fair housing violation if they tried to kick them out and such. So have you considered, if you restrict, for one thing, restricting children in a certain area, in a situation like this, is somewhat a violation of fair housing laws? And are you subject to those? And have you considered what may happen if you try to steer those people to one area instead of letting them move where they want to in their building?
The law has been amended regarding senior buildings to allow for areas where seniors can live with children.
Okay, so there are other buildings like that in the state of Illinois that...
That is correct, yes. As a matter of fact, there are 2 buildings that were just completed in Chicago for intergenerational families. One of them is called Sankofa House, and the other one is called Copen House. They were both built by the Interfaith Housing Development Corporation. Both buildings provide intergenerational units for either a grandparent or another blood relative that is responsible for the children. And then there are also in the same building units for children who have aged out of the foster care system. So you could have, for example, a 16-year-old individual or 17 who's aging out of the foster care system, living in an apartment in the same building with a grandparent raising grandchildren.
So you don't see it as maybe an issue if you have a grandparent living in a 2-bedroom unit, and all of a sudden they're in the situation, all your 10 units are taken up by grandparents with grandchildren. All of a sudden they're in a situation where their grandkids have to move in with them. That doesn't become an issue for you, because if they decide to find an attorney to fight being moved out of their unit because of this situation.
No, because the law's on our side, because it's already been established that we can create specific units for grandparents raising grandchildren and reserve those. Plus, as far as the extended use agreement, we are saying that only 20% of the units will be utilized for grandparents raising grandchildren.
Well, and that's what the mobile home park said, that they were forced to take the grandchildren anyway, so.
Let me just ask, we're there, and we're going to lose our quorum here pretty soon. What's the feeling of the committee?
There's all 3 of us. Steve's not on.
Steve's not on it. Oh, we can't take it. We've lost our quorum. Yeah.
Just one of those.
Yeah, that's it. That's what we
No,
don't have a
Steve.
quorum. Just one little quick thing that bothers me a little bit is that I think that you told us tonight that at the time that you made the presentation to the planning board, you knew that there was a pretty good chance that you're going to be trying to have 20% of your project be family, and didn't discuss it there. Right? That would have been the time to discuss it. It seems not here a couple days before the application deadline.
Well, no, we were looking at it at the time that we went, but we weren't sure if we wanted to do that. And so until we knew that it was absolutely viable, we did not present it. And as soon as we determined that it was viable, we did approach the mayor, and we also did approach Alderman Hunter and Alderman Brown. So it actually has been several weeks now since we did reach out. We did because what we had done was I had asked if there were going to be any issues with the passage of the zoning change, and if there were going to be any issues, that maybe it would make sense to pull it off of the February 17th council meeting agenda so that we could continue the discussion and then have that meeting take place, or have that resolution decided at a subsequent meeting.
I think I understand what you're asking for. I don't think that we have the quorum to act on that request tonight. Because we got three of us. There's nothing that we could do that would bind, well, that would even be valid or valid
Or even legal.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so good discussion. I'm glad you were here, and I think I understand it a little bit better now than I did at the beginning of the hour. So it maybe if you want to, so we'll have to consider this at a different time.
Next Monday. Or
No, we'll have to consider it Monday night, the city council meeting.
Would you want to? Would you be willing to put in writing what you're asking for?
We can put that in writing. The only problem is that the application will actually be delivered to Ida on Friday.
Again, we don't meet before then.
Right. And even so, the due date is the 6th, which is the same day that your council meeting, but would have to be in Chicago by 5 o'clock, and I would assume your council meeting isn't until 7 or so.
So where it stands right now, you have a commitment with respect to what the planning commission did, absent the 20% set aside for grandparents raising grandchildren. Is that a correct or a fair statement?
It says 55 plus for a senior assisted independent living facility. But your zoning for R3 multifamily does not provide any type of restrictions whatsoever based on age. And at the time, the Plan Commission was looking to the legalities of being able to put an age restriction in place.
So you think you could make the whole 50 project, 50 units, grand families, based on your zoning?
Based on what's in the zoning handbook for R3 multifamily, that is the case, but that's not what we're looking to do. And for one,
you couldn't adequately have the parking for that.
And for one, just as I had told the mayor a couple of weeks ago when I came to see him, is that yes, it is true that we didn't bring this concept up at the Plan Commission because we were still looking at its viability, and we didn't want to discuss it unless we knew for sure that it was viable. And once we knew that it was viable and made sense for us to pursue it, we then came out and spoke to the mayor, we spoke to the alderman about wanting to include this.
I don't want to argue with you, but what's to stop you from next week saying we want to explore the viability of 50% grand families?
There is nothing to stop us, but we don't wish to do that. That's not our interest.
Okay, well, I mean, the three of us here are not able to act on that request right now. We're not going to be meeting as a body, as a public body until Monday. City Council side, I don't know what we can do here. You said at the beginning of the meeting that it was a rapid deadline. You didn't say when the deadline was.
No, because we did move the budget meeting. Usually the budget meeting would have been the second Monday, which would have helped you.
Pardon?
We can't even act.
No, we can't.
No,
act
we
on
can't.
that. No. We have another agenda item we can't act on. Okay.
I know this is not on the agenda, but I wish you...
Nor can we act on it.
Yeah, we can't act on it anyway. So, you've heard via the newspapers what is transpiring with the School District 111's budget, their proposed deficit, et cetera. And I know during the past few years, under the mayor's administration, we've always hired kids in the summer down in Public Works, and we've had formerly years ago when we had JTPA and so forth, we hired people to work in the various offices. Looking at what may transpire with School District 111, as far as in maybe curtailing some of the summer programs, and with the unemployment level being number 2, and the state is probably higher with respect to low and moderately income kids, we need to address that problem. And I know that it's being proposed that $1.4 billion will be coming out of Washington for summer jobs, part of the stimulus package. And the Kankakee Workforce Services may receive $1 million of those funds. And as a consequence of that, I'd like to see us take some kind of initiative to see if we can secure some slots for some of those kids that may be going through KCC at the workforce office over on Skyler. And if indeed we could consider hiring some supervisors to oversee the activities of those kids, we're going to have to be able to collaborate with the Park District, School District, and KCC in terms of making sure we have some things for some of the kids to do this summer. And maybe I'll bring it up Monday night. And I hadn't mentioned to the mayor, but I know years past we always hit him up for slots for kids during the summer, working on the public works and so forth. So I think we have an affirmative obligation to take a look at what we can possibly do for our kids this summer. I think it's maybe something we want to consider.
We talked about using
And code.
Yep. So
is that an issue where it'll basically be the old summer youth program?
It's the yeah, exactly.
I mean, we did that before. I mean, that's where we hired a lot of kids
Right.
through that. Our cost was the supervisory end of it.
No, what age? Is it 18 to 24 or not?
I think it's 14 through 24 this year.
Okay.
I think it is.
I didn't think it was that.
Yeah, I think,
Yeah.
and what we could use them for is, as the mayor indicated, we hired a slew of them before. Eradication of slum and blight, painting curbs, getting rid of weeds.
We wanted them to do house numbers in the alleys.
Do that, any number of things that we deem appropriate. So I'll probably bring it up Monday night. So under Alderman's comments or something, I want your consideration for that.
Do they have funding already, or they're anticipating?
They're anticipating $1 million. I talked with, what's her name, who's working with, Mary. Mary Jo Martin. I was talking with her.
So
she ran the program before. That's who we dealt with.
So would they pay the kids and we would pay the supervisors?
Exactly.
So anyway, think about that, and I'll probably bring this up Monday night.
Yes, I got one other thing I was mentioning to Steve, and I talked to Jim about it, and no action required, but I am going to bring it up Monday night at the City Council meeting. In Eastgate Industrial Park, when you go in and you go by the UDS building, on the left-hand side, as you get down to the curve to head down towards Toltec, there's a trucking company that sits there on a cul-de-sac, Schubert Trucking and Repair. They have asked us if we would be willing to vacate that cul-de-sac because he owns the property all the way around the cul-de-sac, and it would be easier for his access of trucks in and out of there than allowing it to be a public access. And I talked to legal department about it. We can do it a couple different ways. We can vacate it if we want, let them have it, or we can put that property up for auction and do it that way. But we may come back to the city council with a recommendation. So I'm just giving you a heads up. One of the issues out there is Eastgate Industrial Parkway is one of those roads that needs to be, rebuilt. And if we're not using the cul-de-sac for public purposes, it's really just a private venture. There really isn't any sense in us hanging on to that. And I don't know why it was ever there, other than maybe there were going to be other lots sold off that Schubert ended up buying all of them. So just a heads up, that's all.
And then Monday we'll deal with the continuing spending resolution?
Yes.
Yeah, I'll put it in.
Are you going to go to police?
All right. I guess we should have a motion to adjourn that's not going to be effective.
Well, we done lost it, didn't we?
I think we're done.